Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to the book launch for Ron Kolm's The Bookstore Book. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I mean, part of me is not surprised that we have a full house because Ron is such a great guy. So, of course, everybody would come out and support him. But I was worried because Ron is notorious for giving his books away. And a lot of people received an advance copy, and I was worried that if they had an advance copy, they weren't going to come to celebrate the book. But it looks like a lot of people are here, so I'm really, really pleased. Anyway, my name is Linda Kleinbub, and I'm the founding editor of Pink Trees Press. Pink Trees Press began in 2012 when I took a class with Star Black. And part of our assignment was, instead of doing a midterm or a final, we had to make a book. And we had to learn every part of the book. We had to learn about the copyright and the Library of Congress number and all the little details of the book. And I started making little handmade books in 2012. And the first run had 5 books, and then there were 7 books in the next book. And then over time, I started to make little origami books, and I would give them out at poetry readings. And in 2020, Pink Trees Press did our first mass marketed book, and that was the Silver Tongue Devil Anthology. And it was a wonderful book that contained 120 people from Phillip Giambri's reading series, The Rhymes of an Ancient Mariner. And since then, we put 6 books out, and we have 3 more planned, and I hope to have them out by the end of the year. So it's been really exciting. And tonight, we're here to celebrate Ron Kolm's book, The Bookstore Book. Ron spent 50 years in New York City bookstores, so this is a New York City story like no other. And to get things started, we're going to have Ron who's going to read Encyclopedia Salesman, and then as the night will go on, I will read the bio of each reader, and everybody has a program so you can follow along, and so I'll read the bio, and then the reader will come up and read their piece. And then at the end of the night, we will all hang out until 8 o'clock and just have fun. So we'll get started with Ron reading Encyclopedia Salesman.
I'm going to try to project if I can instead of using the microphone. What? Encyclopedia Salesman. Oh, by the way, Linda, thank you immensely. She has a great book of poetry too. For what it's worth. Encyclopedia Salesman. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. Lenny sings along with the car radio as he drives us on the turnpike across central Pennsylvania. Hey Lenny, no one lives in a fucking yellow submarine. That's all bullcrap. One of the kids, a college student named Rick, shouts from the back seat. We all live in a broken down bar. A burnout Lenny jokes, looking in the rearview mirror. Hey, keep your eyes on the road. Shit, hold on, just blew a tire. Lenny's battered Chevy station wagon skids across the highway, finally coming to a stop on the shoulder where we all breathe a sigh of relief. That was a close one, man. You almost sank the submarine, Skipper. I'll pipe down like lemmings. I'll be right back. Lenny jumps out of the wagon and heads around to the rear, opens it, and flips up the floorboard over the spare tire and emergency jack. He proceeds to use them very efficiently, and in just a couple of minutes we're back on the road heading towards Mechanicsburg. We left Center City, Philadelphia about an hour ago, and Lenny, who's a lot older than us, is our boss. Most of us are still in school. We're doing this gig as a summer job, but Lenny has been living in the real world for quite a while, and he's figured out how to cope with it. As he drives, he tells a story about his adventures, how he had been in the Army, in the Quartermaster Corps, based in Germany not too long after the end of the war. He and his buddies had run off with everything that was supposed to go to the troops, including Army-issue meals, and then sold it at absurdly inflated prices to the locals. Of course, this meant empty cupboards for the GIs they were supposed to be supplying with food and fuel. He thought it was funny that American troops had to requisition even the most basic staples from the Deutsche folk they were billeted among. Anyway, what Lenny had been hired to do for the company we worked for was to transport us to an obviously poor neighborhood in a post-industrial city a couple hours from Philly and drop us off in a scattershot pattern like paratroopers bailing out of a plane behind enemy lines. Our mission was to sell sets of encyclopedias. Lenny would scribble the names of the cross streets on a scrap of paper and tell us salesman that he would stop back in 5 hours at that exact location and the salesman better be there, or else. We all wore watches. Time was not necessarily on our side. The neighborhoods we were turned loose into had to fit a profile. Lenny would drive until he found the poor part of town. Ancient row houses, broken down duplexes, etc., and we'd look for battered toys in the front yards. That was important. If there was no evidence of kids around, Lenny would continue to scout around in different areas of the city until he found some. After getting out of his car, I would take a deep breath to clear my mind as I watched my teammates vanish into the distance. That was my way of getting rid of any ethical considerations that were still knocking around inside me. Then I'd check out my surroundings looking for the nearest house, most likely to have a prospective client inside. I'd look for peeling paint, exposed sheets of tar paper under damaged fake brick siding, unmowed lawns, windows with missing panes of glass. After choosing a victim, I would unlatch the front gate, if there was one, and walk up to the usually cracked cement walk to the front door and ring the doorbell. If there wasn't a doorbell, I would knock loudly. Someone usually answered, a haggard young mother with curlers in her hair, an unemployed ex-steel worker. Sometimes it was both parents with their kids, opening the door crack and asking what I wanted. I always followed the script we had been carefully coached to use. I would like to help you with some of your problems. May I come in and talk to you? I promise not to take up too much of your time. And the person or persons at the door were invariably nice, deferential to you because you were dressed in slightly better clothes. You had to be careful not to overdress. We've been trained to impress but not intimidate. And as you followed them into their home, you continued to follow the script. Nice place you have here, Mr. or Mrs. Jones. Eventually you would end up on a worn sofa in a dingy living room, light struggling to come in through the dirty windows, facing one or both parents whose children had left the broken toys outside on the lawn or on the porch. So how can you help us, you'd be asked. Well, this is about your kids, you'd answer. I would guess you want them to have a better life than you. Did you graduate from high school, Mr. Jones? Did you, Mrs. Jones? No. Wouldn't it be great if your kids did? And this is where you would try to get the parent or parents to agree with you. The word for this procedure is qualified. You would go for as many yeses as you could get. And then you came in with the pitch. $2 a day, that's all it would cost. $2 a day in this tiny cardboard box. And you would soon have enough to buy this wonderful set of encyclopedias that would guarantee that your children would eventually make it through high school and then go to college. Just $2 a day. That's all. And it usually worked. That fall, I left my parents' house outside of Philadelphia and went away to college in Reading, Pennsylvania. To help pay for my textbooks and tuition, I got a part-time job in a bookstore. I sold New Directions and City Lights books, which I loved, and even the occasional encyclopedia.
Thank you, Ron. And next up, we will have Amy Barone, who is going to be reading a Philadelphia story. Amy Barone's poetry collection, Defying Extinction, was published by Bookstore Book in 2022. New York Quarterly Books published the book We Became Summer. She wrote chapbooks Kamikaze Dance, Finishing Line Press, and Views from a Driveway, Foothills Publishing. Barone belongs to the Poetry Society of America, and she lives in New York City. Welcome, Amy Barone.
Congratulations, Ron. I'm honored to be reading tonight. A Philadelphia story. I worked in a bookstore in Reading, Pennsylvania when I was in college. It was quite different from a New York City bookstore. We sold furniture, school supplies, and an interesting assortment of snacks. I did my best to make the stock we carried respectable. I ordered Joyce, Beckett, and Updike, who had lived in Shillington, a suburb of Reading, in his youth. Most of our customers just wanted a fast read. I sympathized, but pushed my favorite authors on them anyway. The owner would take me aside and tell me to cut it out. I shrugged my shoulders and he hissed, "Only bums do that." I didn't like him very much. There was a lot of dead time, Reading was not a reading city, so I would flip through the art books and look at the color plates to get through the long afternoons. I discovered the surrealists, and that's when my life changed. I made up my mind that someday I would be part of a circle of writers and artists just like them. And then, by logical extension, I stumbled upon the Dadaists. Marcel Duchamp became my idol. I devoured his works, The Bride Stripped Bare, Nude Descending a Staircase, and The Chocolate Grinder. I read that several of his pieces were in the Philadelphia Museum of Art in the Aaronsburg collection. And then his final work, Given, 1, The Waterfall, 2, The Illuminating Gas. A mixed media assemblage consisting of a wooden door surrounded by bricks concealing something was there too. But I couldn't find an illustration or description of what was behind it anywhere, so I knew I'd have to go to the City of Brotherly Love and check it out in person. My parents still lived outside of Philly in the house I'd grown up in. I went to see them and made plans to visit the museum. Unfortunately, when I did manage to get there, the wing of the museum with the Aaronsburg collection in it was closed to the public due to budget cuts. A fiscal crisis had swept across the nation, and it hit Philadelphia hard. The Museum of Art is like a large U, basically 2 wings jutting out from the main building, and they only had enough money to guard 1 wing at a time. I'd have to return when the side of the museum I wanted to see was open. Deeply disappointed, I took the commuter train back up to Chestnut Hill and hitched a ride. You could do that back then, to where I was staying with my parents. On a day I knew the wing of the museum I wanted to see should be open, I headed back into Center City. After I entered the museum, I aimed for the right wing, which was to my left, and which was, as I had hoped, open. I walked through the Aaronsburg collection, where Duchamp's paintings and constructs were displayed, checking them out in cursory fashion as my eyes were focused on the prize. The building was still empty. I passed only 1 or 2 guards and finally reached a dead end. In this room, there was a large wooden farm door, though in truth it was more like a castle gate. It was made of thick planks surrounded by a stone archway. When I walked up to it, I noticed 2 tiny holes had been drilled in the middle. I looked through them and saw the most wonderful sight. It was a naked female mannequin, her face obscured by the broken bricks framing the scene, reclining in a field of fake grass, holding aloft a tiny gaslight which was lit. Behind this tableau was a painted landscape depicting a waterfall. It was obviously an appropriation of the Statue of Liberty. Duchamp's cry for real freedom in the land of the not-so-free. It was not only a tremendous work of art, what he had done was truly funny. I cracked up, laughing out loud. A guard rounded the corner with a stern look on his face and wondered what was up. "I've just seen God," I told him, and left the room.
Thank you very much, Amy. Next up, we have Puma Perl. Puma Perl is a poet, writer, and performer, and is the author of 2 chapbooks, Ruby True and Belinda and Her Friends, and 3 full-length poetry collections, Knuckle Tattoos, Retrograde, Great Brothers Media, and Birthdays Before and After, Beyond Baroque Books. Her band, Puma Perl and Friends, brings spoken word together with rock and roll and has performed together since 2012. Welcome, Puma Perl.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Ron, for inviting me to be part of this. I love this book.
Announce when your band is going to be playing.
My band is going to be playing, thank you, Sunday, August 13th, at this very cool new spot called the Francis Kite Club at 40 Avenue C. It's free of charge, and if you're a SAG-AFTRA member, you get 20% off drinks, so everybody come and drink a lot. Thank you, Ron. Okay, this is called Privates. I used to go to clubs and hear a lot of music. One of the clubs I went to was called Privates on 85th Street on the Upper East Side. Once it had been a Privates club, but that had closed, and now it was a cool place to see bands. A lot of great music happened there, from Bo Diddley to the Specials. Because of my bookstore connections, I got invited to an exclusive William Burroughs event that was scheduled to take place in that venue. At the time, I was managing New Morning, a bookstore in Soho named after the Bob Dylan album. It was owned by High Times magazine, and for that reason, it was considered hip. We made sure we always had a complete run of William Burroughs books in stock. His work, published by Grove Press, was very popular. So I was thrilled at getting the chance to see him, a writer I admired, in person. I had always considered Burroughs to be the American Celine, another writer I loved. And I figured that Allen Ginsberg must have felt the same way. Allen Ginsberg seemed to surround himself with archetypes. He took along only one in each category on his extended beatnik trip. Anne Waldman was a token woman. Horsaw was the crazy dude, and Burroughs was the European experimental prose writer. The European intellectual experimental prose writer. I got there just as Burroughs was making his grand entrance, and to this day that scene was vividly in my mind. He came in with an entourage, an army of very young men, all of them about the same height and all very well dressed. They crowded around Bill, which seemed to raise him up so that his feet barely touched the floor. There was a humming sound emanating from them as they passed by. It was like the buzzing of a cluster of worker bees carrying the queen to her throne in the hive. They escorted him to what looked like a gazebo, a small round structure in the middle of the hall. And then the celebration ensued. I got loaded, and the rest of that evening was just a blur. So Ron also asked me to read something on my own, and I happened to dig up this poem called I Wish William Burroughs Was My Mother. I mean, it's so old, it looks like I took a bite out of it. I wish William Burroughs was my mother. We gathered at the Cornelia Street Cafe to celebrate William Burroughs' 101st birthday. Poets and writers, artists and lovers, all hailing the jump master, the gun-toting, queer-loving, naked raiser of a cadaver, inventor of the phrase heavy metal, owner of a dildo christened Steely Dan. Anne Waldman chanted, Amy Herman cut up, Jan Herman remembered. Penny Arcade shared with us bits of Burroughs' axioms, his words of advice to young people. Avoid fuck-ups, he counseled, or you will be a fuck-up too. Don't talk to the mentally ill, cautioned Bill, they will only make you crazy. Awed by his practicality and pragmatism, I found myself wishing that William Burroughs had been my mother. I doubt that my unruly hair or ripped jeans would have driven him to lie in bed, kicking his pasty white legs and threatening suicide. If he discovered my secret pot stash, he surely would have smoked it up himself and lied about it. But I don't think he'd have threatened me with lifetime lockup at Kings County, or kicked me down the stairs for coming home at 4 a.m. from the Fillmore East. More than likely, he would have been out himself, engaged in activities both interesting and illegal, and much too busy to care about my bad grades, my William love letters, and my Parliament cigarettes. I'm sure that his son, poor Willie Jr., if he lived, would disagree with me about his parental worth, but allow me to be quite clear. I do not wish that William Burroughs had been my father. I wish that he had been my mother, unemotional, sensible, detached, disdainful of the stupid and the crazy, playing three-card Monte with the devil who is no more or less dishonorable than the priest. They all cheat, he would have warned me, and anyone who says they aren't in it for the money is in it for the money. I hope my pretend mother is having himself a happy 101, that he's writing another novel just to keep busy, keeping an eye out for old junk pushes dropping dollars on the grounds, and him in his black hat, always careful about whose money he picks up.
Thank you, Puma Perl. Next up, we have Pauline Findlay. Pauline Findlay is a poet and filmmaker for poetry and motion. Her new book, Dysfunction, a play on words in the familiar, was released by Pink Trees Press, and it is a poetic circus filled with winding roads that ask one question: which road will you take? She has performed at the Fahrenheit Reading Series, bookstores, Women of Color outdoors festivals. You can find her films on YouTube, and I advise everybody to look up Pauline's films on YouTube. They're really wonderful. And you can also see her on Instagram at Ringmaster Slideshow. Welcome, Pauline Findlay.
Thank you, Ron, for having me. Congratulations. Me and Patty. For a brief while, Patty Smith and I shelved books in the Strand bookstore at the same time. I did get a chance to see her perform with Glenn Kay playing the guitar on the rooftop high above Grand Street. But our main interaction happened when she strode up to me in the bookstore and thrust a Cosman recording of James Joyce reading in my hands. Someone told me I looked like him and gave me this. That's bullshit. I heard you like him, so it's yours. I still have the record in my collection. The next piece is called Yet Another Stranger. Yet Another Strange Customer. I'm arranging used books, just purchased by the owner in the Strand bookstore, when a priest joins me at the front sales table. I love to tempt the dying, he says, at my sleeve, tugging at my sleeve. And in the end, I always manage a fine impromptu anguish. He touches my shoulder and whispers, I can even call your enemies by name. I twist away from him, hoping he'll disappear so I can continue working. I studied the science of beautiful thoughts when I was just a novice, he promised, vanishing back into the stacks. I could break your heart. And Ron asked me to read something as well. It's going to be very short. Everyone knows I am not a love poet, so let's try. Sweet D'Artagnan, love me until the day of Armageddon, beyond ripened honeysuckles and dust granules, beyond enmity and equanimity, beyond pestilence and desolation. Insulate my heart with the arched branches of weeping willow, concaved and concealed in the bosom of a trunk. Let us be the supernovas of the Milky Way, spiraling into our own sphere, creating a luminescence, equivocal, evolution, inexplicable to matter, equations, or theories. Remind me of love when all is nocturnal awakenings. Seed my insecurities and sacred thoughts. Make me whole to the fullness of the harvest moon. Stand before God, avowing love. Sit in the nape of a cardinal and croon me to his ear an anthem of splendor. Take the adaptation of my lyrics and make it what you live by. Open me to the moisture of rivers that run beyond mountains and vapid air, as you embrace all that is yours. Love me as the sun sets and night cries for a rival song. until the day of Armageddon, when we will be no more.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much, Pauline Findlay. Next up, we have Carl Watson. Carl Watson is an author of 4 novels, the latest being Only Descend, a tragic love story that takes place in the late 90s. He has several poetry books, including the most recently, Stage Fright and Afterthoughts, both by Apathy Press of Baltimore. Welcome, Carl Watson.
Congratulations, Ron. Thanks for having me. Is my voice acting weird?
That's an
You know that first story you read about where the guy Lenny says, we all live in a broken down barn? I actually do live in a broken down barn, so I just came down here today and I almost didn't make it because when I went to the gas station to buy my bus ticket, they told me it was sold out. The bus was sold out, it's never sold out. So then I called up Trailways and I said, I gotta get down there, and they told me, they said, just hold on. This kind woman named Daphne, if you ever have trouble with Trailways, ask for her. She finally got me a seat, it went all the way through to New York, so that was a happy coincidence, that's how I made it. This story is called Size Matters. I told Ron I didn't want to read anything that was naughty. I moved to Manhattan after I finished college in my service as a Vista volunteer. I lucked out and found an apartment in Hell's Kitchen, very close to Times Square. Hell's Kitchen was the only neighborhood in New York City I knew anything about because it was near the Port Authority bus terminal. Back when I was enrolled in Albright College in Reading, Pennsylvania, I studied drama, and the professor who taught the class would charter buses to the Port Authority and then walk us over to Times Square to see plays. He always chose the most outrageous ones because he was trying to teach us to rebel against the status quo. His favorite playwright was Bertolt Brecht. After class, we'd gossip in the hall, and we all pretty much agreed that our professor on some level considered himself to be Brecht reincarnated. One of the plays he took us to was Hair. That evening kind of shocked me because the actors and actresses were telling us to be free and live a hippie lifestyle, but the audience was basically men and women in tuxedos and evening gowns. There was such a disconnect. Our professor ran up and down the aisles waving his arms and cheering, but we looked at him and at each other and just shrugged. At the end of the night, we took a bus back to Pennsylvania. After settling into my new living space, I started looking for a job. I also wanted to sample the incredible culture that was now surrounding me. In college, I took a lot of literature classes and had been introduced to the works of James Joyce, among others. He was now my favorite author, and I heard that there was a James Joyce Society that met at the Gotham bookstore. I went there several times to buy copies of his books. As the weeks went by, I didn't have any luck finding employment. I was getting desperate, so I decided to head over to the Gotham bookmark to see if they were hiring. After several minutes of browsing through the selected letters of James Joyce, I approached one of the managers and inquired about the possibility of working there. Sure, he replied. He turned and pointed to a small table with a typewriter on it, surrounded by many tall stacks of books. There was a tiny steel chair almost hidden beneath it. If you can fit, you got the job. I couldn't, and I didn't, so I left. Luckily, the Strand bookstore, a much larger store, eventually hired me, so I was able to remain in New York.
Thank you very much, Carl. Joyce is widely published, award-winning poet, editor, and college professor who has won 2 NYFA fellowships and an ACRA award. She's published 3 books of poetry and 2 forthcoming, L-Shaped Room and As If, and edits White Rabbit. Her poems have most recently appeared in 8917, NYC From the Inside, Mudfish, Brownstone Poets, and other anthologies. She's currently working on a memoir, The Bastard Heirs, about art and poetry in the 80s and 90s, and that features photos by an award-winning photojournalist, Gary Azar. Welcome, Dorothy.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, it's a great pleasure to be here and honor Ron Kolm for his dedication to writing, to his own writing, to other people's writing, and all that he's done for all of us. I'm going to read the short blurb that I wrote to begin from the book, which is as follows. Ron Kolm's The Bookstore Book is a ride tour de force, a clever compendium of insightful stories and anecdotes on art and life in New York City. In poetry and prose, the bookstore becomes a microcosm and metaphor for Kolm's life experience. It contains shapely, honed anecdotes on celebrity, those tormented souls we call artists. A roller coaster ride, vivid and insightful. Ron asked me to read 2 pieces from the book. They're both poems. The first one mentions Andy Warhol and Valerie Solanas. He probably wanted me to read that because I'm so much like Valerie Solanas. Although, Taylor Mead did once write an article that said if she hadn't shot Andy, I would have. I guess he was kidding. Anyway, this is the philosophy of Andy Warhol from A to B and back again. It's on page 66 if you have the book. When I was working in Eastside Bookstore on St. Mark's Place in the mid-70s, one of my favorite books was Andy Warhol's The Philosophy of Andy Warhol from A to B and back again. When he got shot in the factory, I was totally shocked. I couldn't believe that anyone would try to hurt him. Anyway, one of my duties in the store was to take books and zines from neighborhood folk and sell them on consignment. They would eventually be paid for what sold. One afternoon, a woman came into the store, glared at me, then slapped a small stack of books on the counter and said we had to sell them. I picked up a copy. It was The Scum Manifesto by Valerie Solanas, who was now staring at me intently. I knew she was the person who shot Andy Warhol. From watching the news on TV, sure, we'll try to sell it, I told her nervously, and gave her a receipt. She spun around and left the store. I put her books on a rack, mentally apologized to Andy Warhol, and breathed a sigh of relief. Actually, it's a very interesting book, The Scum Manifesto. This is page 77. It's a poem called ACRA Awards. In 2013, I got an ACRA Award from Clayton Patterson for being the editor of the Evergreen Review after Barney Ross had passed away. I actually knew Kathy Acker her back in the day when I was managing New Morning Bookstore in Soho. She would stop by and ask to use our only phone, talking on it for hours, which made it difficult to place orders. I need to call a publisher, I'd beg. Sorry, she'd say, I can't hang up. I've got my agent on the line. And then I'd go back to pricing books. And Ron asked me to read one poem, I believe, something like that. So I'm going to read this called How I Was Born. I was born in a year of postponements. There was the Grand Prix, the Kentucky Derby, and me. I was born gnawing at my own flesh and ripped from society's womb with bloody fingernails. I was born with a man crashing his fist down on me. I was born encumbered by compulsory sterilizations, attempts at population control and gender normalizing. I was born in the shadow of the eugenics movement and shock treatments and the final solution. I watched my father in the 50s shocked into being a nice Jewish man, his voice frozen in his throat. I was born controlled by strange hands who held me down at Welfare Island. I was born in a loony bin among misfits and lunatics. I had no mother, so I bought one at the lottery of missing parents. What could a creature like me become who wouldn't say the Pledge of Allegiance? They tried to condition me to be a good Jewish daughter, but I'm not really sure if I am a man or a woman, black or white, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. But in the videotape, I am a voice that won't stay shut. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy, Friedman, August. Next up, we have Patricia Carragon. Patricia Carragon's work is in numerous journals and anthologies. Her latest chapbooks from Poets Wear Prada are Miauku and the Cupcake Chronicles. Her debut novel, Angel Faria, is from Alien Buddha Press. She hosts a Brooklyn-based Brownstone Poets, and she is the editor-in-chief of the annual Brownstone Poets Anthology. Welcome.
Congratulations, Ron. Great guy. You are a bookstore. Gonna read two. It takes a pandemic to end a 50-year career of working in New York City's independent bookstores, which included the Strand, Eastside Books, New Morning, Coliseum Books, St. Mark's Bookshop, and Postman Books, which closed on March 16th due to the virus. The last book I sold there was Candace's The Plague. And more COVID stuff, a subway story in the time of COVID-19. I had to travel into Manhattan to cash my unemployment check, so I sat in the front car wearing a mask, doing my best to avoid the other passengers. After leaving the bank, I walked back to Union Square Station and found a place on the platform where there were too many people standing around waiting. Time goes by and no train appears. There's a sudden movement as a woman, maybe late 50s, tosses her bag and her mask onto the tracks. Then clumsily climbs down and joins them. Hey, what's up? I shout through my mask. She moans and says that this is how she's going to get home. She's tired of everything. She edges over towards the third rail, and unfortunately, because of my back is so messed up, I can't physically grab her. So I unleash my best zinger. Do you believe in any kind
Because if you do, you gotta know how pissed off he or she is gonna be. Boy, that's so wrong. Okay, I'm gonna read the last one. This will be what I wrote recently. Shout out to Sinead O'Connor. May she rest in peace, poor lady. Feels so different. I feel so different from the child who sits alone. But she is not alone. I am by her side. But she can see me, hear me, feel my hand on her shoulder. But she will be all right. I can't hug her, dry her tears, fight those demons that mock her. I can't tell her not to worry about the harsh years ahead, and that wounds will reopen unannounced at night. But she will be all right. I feel so different now, but I am learning to remember her, care for her, live for her, honor her, love her, because I am still her, and I will be all right. That's Ron Kolm.
Thank you, Patty. I love that very enthusiastic reading. That was really great. All right, next up we have Austin Alexis. Austin Alexis is the author of Privacy Issues from 2014 and 2 previously published chapbooks. His work has appeared in Barrow Street, Hawaii Pacific Review, Flash Boulevard, and the anthologies From Somewhere to Nowhere, NYC From the Inside, and elsewhere. He has work forthcoming in the American Book Review. Welcome, Austin Alexis.
Many congratulations, Ron. I really identify with the book, and I feel so familiar with so many of the places and names in the book. For instance, I had a roommate who dated Kathy Acker, and then his best friend dated Kathy Acker, and stole Kathy Acker from him. And then also CBGBs, I had a roommate who played CBGBs, so I'm connected to the work. So Ron asked me to read Armadillo Bookstore. For several weeks, I worked in a small bookstore on the corner of West 10th and Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village. One night, a customer approached the cash register with a big stack of books and asked if he could pay for them with a personal check. Sure, but I have to see some ID. It's the store policy, I told him. Isn't this enough? He asked, leaning forward and framing his face with his hands. I knew it was William Punchler, the famous radical lawyer, but I wasn't impressed by his macho display. So I said, no, please show me your identification. Deflated, he took out his wallet. And Ron asked me to read something of my own, so I'll read this short poem. It's one of my gym poems. I've been working on a series of poems about going to the gym and everything that happens at the gym. The weight, and the title is also part of the first line. The weights room smells like swamp. Decaying weeds, dead toads, ponds fuming from a heat wave. sounds like an underwater world where noises are shy and dreamlike and smothered. The weight of competition is heavy as I pump and press the dumbbell up. Too many times it has crashed down on my chest, causing me to bite my mucous membrane, to taste my tongue's blood. I find the weights room trying, tiring. My feet jock-strapped tight in sneakers, Sudan heated, Congo hot, my waist pinched by a Velcro band. I climb available stairs up to normality of stationary bikes, treadmills, and stretch mats. A different dimension where the world of bulk-heavy muscles and grunting bodybuilders vanishes like an erection deprived of testosterone.
Thank you very much, Austin and Alexis. Next up, we have Peter Carlaftes. Peter Carlaftes is the author of 5 books, including the poetry collection Life in the Past Lane, Drunk Your Dog, and I Am Bold with the Hand I Was Dealt. 2 collections of plays, Tea Trophy and Triumph for Rent. He's co-editor of the annual contemporary Dada Journal Vietnam and the editor of The Faking of the President, 19 Stories of White House Noir. His poetry has recently appeared in New York from the Inside, Love, Love, Chorus, a literary mixtape, and many more. Co-director of 3 Rooms Press. He lives in New York City. Welcome, Peter Carlaftes.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for having me, Ron, and thanks for writing the Bookstore Book many years ago. We might have worked together, but I was working at Cinemabilia on 13th, and they had me stuck in the stills and the posters, so and I could have gotten a job at the Strand at that time, but I think you were out of there by then, right? 78, 79? 75. Yeah, you were going there. So. But we were close to Cody. So he's got me reading Philip Roth. I met Philip Roth when I was working at Coliseum Books on the corner of 57th Street in Broadway. Coliseum was one of the largest bookstores in Manhattan at the time and was the place to go if you were a serious lover of books. Coliseum was also at the top of the list of places to make an appearance for published authors, particularly best-selling ones. The tiny, grizzled Norman Mailer came by the store, escorted by his statuesque wife, Norris Church, who walked him like a wayward bulldog up the steep steps to the manager's station, where we piled copies of his books to be signed. He grumbled, but he signed them anyway. Then there was a time the famous novelist Philip Roth stopped by. The store manager, who was starstruck, let him walk up the 3 steps that led behind the counters where the cashiers and the cash registers were. There was a long plate glass window overlooking Broadway behind them, and the early afternoon sun would shine brightly through it. This same sun was now etching a fiery halo around Philip Roth's head and shoulders as I looked up at him. I was struck dumb by a vision before me. I so wanted to ask him about one of his early books, Letting Go, that had played an important part in my life when I was in college, but I simply couldn't get the words to come out. He thanked the store manager, turned, and left. He visited the store many times after that, as he lived on the Upper West Side. I'd say hello to him, and that was about it. I never did get a chance to engage him in a conversation about letting go before he passed away. Ron Kolm. And then he asked me to read something of mine. I don't know. I hate to go away from New York, but this took place, since we're starstruck, this is about Lawrence Ferlinghetti. So I'm gonna do this one, but it was in San Francisco. I'm sorry, New York. All right. No makeup date. I went to the studio one mid-afternoon and ordered a pint of beer when Lawrence Ferlinghetti, whom I heard had just turned 80, sat down on the stool next to me. I nodded my head and he nodded back. So I proffered, the last time this city had any real bearing was when all the sailors returned through the gate right after World War II. He looked at me and said, I was one of those sailors. The stage was set. I reached for my beer, which spilled across the bar. As people rushed in and whisked him away like I had every plague in the world. Little old me sitting sober as a judge while I hadn't yet taken a sip from my glass. Heading home, then I thought, you only get one chance. But at least they didn't charge me for the beer. Drop some for the post office. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Peter Carlaftes. And next up, we have Didi Champagne. Didi Champagne has performed on New York City stages for almost 40 years, including CBGB's. She has performed her poetry at ABC No Rio and other venues. A book of poetry and artwork is called Life of a Kalamata, and it is available now. Just ask her. Here we go, Didi Champagne.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, Ron. When I got his book, I'm not kidding you, I opened it up, and of course, I opened up to CBGB's. I was very ecstatic about this poem. I still have great memories. I didn't finish college actually, but I came back in '81, and there I was, a CBGB's girl. I feel so connected to your book. I used to go and get the poetry calendar at the St. Mark's Bookstore. It was 3 tiers and go to all of them and all the clubs. And I hung out with, at CBGB's, not only did my bands play there, but I hung out with Tuli Cupperford from the Fox, if anybody remembers. It says, oh, he was a blast, I have to tell you. I didn't understand what he said, but I just agreed and shook my head. I also saw Meredith Monk there. She was one of my favorites. Who else? Taylor Mead, I hung out with Taylor Mead. He's Andy Warhol. Oh my gosh, so many. Lou Reed. I remember there was also a pizza stand, a pizza place next door, and I was eating pizza. It wasn't the best pizza, but it was Henry Rollins. It was cool though. So let me read this. And I used to also hang out at a place called, it was in downtown Beirut. I think it was on 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, and I hung out with Maggie a step there. And I remember when I was at downtown Beirut, who was coming around the corner was Henry Hunky. If anybody remembers it, he was coming around the corner, and he's like, can you do me a favor? And I said, no, I'm really busy. He says, I'm busy too. Anyway. So I'm going to read this CBGB's poem. Okay. I worked in the Strand bookstore with Tom Verlaine. He invited me to CBGB's the first time his band, Television, played there. Punk was born that night. I ended up getting into a fight with my date, and we left to take it outside. I can identify with that. That's my poem. Tom yelled at me the next day, why the F did you split? I responded by asking, how the hell he knew I'd left? I can see everything from the stage, he answered, as he continued to shelve books. There was also a telephone booth in that club. Does everybody remember that? I lost my shoe there. It was a shoe. Because I had my platform shoes and I came home and I was like, why do I seem sure? Okay, the next poem is Another You, and another, I don't know why I can identify with this. I was actually working at Andy's Cheapies, and I remember one of the mannequins was not really working properly, so I ended up being a mannequin. I was really good. I'm telling you, I used to stand there and stare, and if he yelled at me, I didn't answer. I just stood there and stared, and I put on nice clothing. So this poem from his wonderful book is called Another You. I thought we'd agreed to meet in the bookstore after I finished work. I leafed through magazines, killing time, waiting for you to show up, and when you don't head downtown, disappointed. The club is jammed, everyone dancing to 50s R&B. I look over to the bar, and there you are, your back to the door, dressed in black, short blonde hair. I'm hungry for you, but I'm angry too. What's up? I say, touching your back. Excuse me, you say, turning around, I see it really, not you at all. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read a teeny tiny poem. Now, I don't know what made me write this poem, but I think it must have been, there was a Johnny Thunder special that I had played years ago at Katie's Castaway. And I remember I was coming out of a club, it was 1990, I think, and I was actually pretty awake. But I do remember walking down 8th Street. I was coming out of Brownie's, the club, the nightclub, the after hours. And so actually this poem might be part of the identifying where I saw Johnny Thunders was on the Jersey paper, unfortunately. So this is his poem. Reading beyond the first sentence is crucial. She's a fortune teller and she's high on demand. Her existence takes us to another place, and we don't really have to bare our soul, but just cast a shadow on a page, like a hole in the cloud, or like licking a leftover knife. Her hair is a jungle red, as ripe as murder. Days and nights crisscross her footsteps, tapping the sidewalk like a piece of chalk. The jukebox played a rough beat all night, placing the camera inside her hustle that'll ride your swing. A wired brain into another day, and it begins all over again, tapping the sidewalk like a piece of chalk. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful. And thank you, Ron. I'm so honored. You're so cool. Ron is cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Didi Champagne. Next up, we have Phillip Giambri. Phillip left home at 18 and never looked back. He's seen and done what others dream or fear. That's how he lives, and that's how he writes. He was a 2022 Nassau County Poet Laureate Society Poetry Contest winner, a 2020 APRA Award recipient for storytelling and community service. Philip's 2022 memoir, Good Boy, Bad Boy, A Better Man, covers his early life in the 1940s in South Philadelphia, up to his life in the East Village in the 70s. Philip's 2020 novelette, The Amorous Adventures of Blondie and Boho, is a story of love, survival, and gentrification in New York City's East Village. And the chapbook, Poems from an Unending Pandemic, offers his perspective on New York City life during the COVID-19 pandemic. His 2017 chapbook, Love Born in Retrograde, is a collection of love poems and erotica, and the 2016 memoir, Confessions of a Repeat Offender, is a compilation of his performance stories and poems. Welcome, Phillip Giambri.
That was a little pretentious, wasn't it? Classic music lover. It was a warm late summer afternoon in June. 1976. And I was getting ready to close the store in about an hour. The evening junkie group nod had already started. They shuffled in one after another, assumed their usual positions in front of the poetry section, where they leaned slowly forward and then backwards so far you'd think they're going to fall, but they never did. Defying gravity for hours until the end of the night. When I had to close, I would gently tell them, you really do have to leave now, but I never touched them. Because I learned from bitter experience how badly it freaked them out. They'd scream, they'd wave their arms around, knocking books off the shelves, and have to beat a retreat back to the cash register. Anyway, I was listening to Velvet Underground, my favorite band at the time, turned up real loud in the stereo when a grizzled old gentleman stepped into my field of vision, glared at me, and snapped, turn that shit off and play some classical music. I always said, fuck you, but I recognized that. It was Charles Bukowski, probably in town for a reading. I like this music and I'm not taking it off, I said, expecting an angry reply. But he surprised me. He apologized instead. I'm sorry, he muttered, turning on his heels and leaving the store. To this day, I say everything 3 times on Bukowski. And I wish I told him how much I liked his novel Post Office, which I've read at least 3 times. This is called The Beat Goes On. You can't make this shit up, really. Only Ron could do this. It was a slow night in the bookstore, so I went over to the literature section and grabbed a copy of Celine's Death of the Installment Plan. Took it back to my post at the cash register. I hid it under the counter because we weren't supposed to read on the job. I didn't want to get fired. But just as I opened the book, there was a loud banging on the front door. I looked up and I saw a disheveled man throwing himself against it, rattling the glass planes. Ah, crap, I muttered, putting the book away and leaving my seat to deal with the problem. I yanked the door open and came face to face with a broken human being straight out of Celine. When I reached out to restrain him, a voice behind me bellowed, "Back off, Ron. That's a famous beat poet, Corbury Corso. I'm a piece of his in the journal I'm about to publish." "I'm sorry," I said sheepishly. "I had no idea." The store's owner put his arm around Corso's shoulders, escorted him down the stairs into the basement. I returned to Celine, who by now seemed to be right on the money. Ron was a Vista volunteer, and in one of his previous books he wrote a story about the challenge he and his lady faced trying to make love in his old pickup truck out in Appalachia. Here's my Me Too version. It's called Girdle Girl. And it's not a pickup. Sometimes I dream we're still lovers. I remember filling up the tank of my T-Bird with Amico White for $22.9. We head to the lakes and start making out. But in that beautiful bird with the cramped bucket seats and the console between them, even with 2 of us tugging on it, her girdle is near impossible to get off. So we finally give up and agree an oral tonight or nothing. But the cops come and shine a light in the window, and it cost me $20 bribe for us not to get busted. Old times weren't really all good times. Thank you.
Thank you, Phillip Giambri. Last but not least, we have Cat Georges. Cat Georges is the author, poet, and playwright and graphic designer, author of Or, in other words, like Wow, Our Lady of the Hunger and 3 Somebodies, plays about notorious dissidents. She is co-editor of the annual contemporary Dada journal, Mitna. Her poems have recently appeared in New York from the Inside, Arriving at the Shoreline, and Monster Killer. She lives in New York City, where she is co-director of 3 Rooms Press, a literary publisher driven by diversity, Dada, punk, and passion. Welcome, Cat Georges.
All right, as your last reader here, I get the honor of telling everybody, let's give up a big third story applause for Ron Kolm. This is I love memoirs, but I love this one especially because of it combining, it's a very original form of a memoir. Combining poetry with essays and just all of it so real, it rings so true. So I was lucky enough to read the one called Garbage Run. I was going to say Garbage Run, but that's not. Okay. So Garbage Run. One of my duties in the bookstore is to take out the trash. One night, not so long ago, I was carrying a big stack of flattened cardboard boxes down the steep flight of steps behind the store when I slipped and fell hard on my left hand. A passerby helped me up and we both stared at my index finger, which now resembled a swastika. He walked me into the store where the manager, upon seeing my hand, sent me immediately to City MD on 14th Street. The doctor there, a young man, tried as hard as he could to straighten my finger, but nothing worked. So he sent me to the nearby emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital. It was Saturday night in the West Village, always an interesting time. A bunch of disco refugees staggered into the waiting room looking for a toilet. Sorry, it's flooded, the guard said. They didn't believe him, but they split, calling him an asshole as he left. A disheveled guy came in, probably homeless, and sat down beside me. He took off his right shoe, then his sock. Then he popped his dislocated big toe back into place. I envied him, wishing I could do that with my finger. I was finally seen by a doctor who looked at my hand, sucked on her tongue, and said, I've seen this before. She grabbed my index finger and yanked it hard. There was a tearing sound, but it worked. I made a mental note that a woman had succeeded where a man had failed, thanked her immediately, and went home. And I'm going to read a poem of mine. This one is about a bookstore too. The best love affair is the one you've never had. I looked up Tampa, Florida area bookstores online because I was going down there, hoping to find a wondrous smaller operation filled with wall-to-wall books, the classics, hot new titles, and hundreds of selections by the best independent book publishers, of which I am. The highest recommendations were for bookstores with hidden, smooth, and very active glory holes. I pictured muscular men clad in tight blue jeans, combing the bookshelves for Shakespeare sonnets, or Henry Miller, or William Burroughs, latching onto a fine, well-bound selection, turning to page 143, reading a fiercely erotic passage, then stumbling, knees a-quiver, to a dimly lit backroom storage area, location known from some weathered 1980s gay guidebook, finding the portal, left hand holding the book open, right hand fumbling to undo buttons, aligning and thrusting into the dark, then reciting, sometime too, hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is its gold complexion dimmed. Of course, maybe those famed glory holes were only to be found in adult bookstores. The best love affair is the one you never had. By habit or temperament, I am fated to stay in the aisles of places where the only seduction is found on paper and ink, seeking the glory of thought to foment its ravishing on every page.
Thank everybody for coming out tonight. Ron has a few books left, but unfortunately, I think we're going to sell out tonight. But I think he's going to take orders because he has a shipment coming in any day now. So it's up to him. I think he might be doing that tonight as well. But we can stay until 8 o'clock, and we have so many great people that I haven't seen in a long time. So please hang around and let's socialize and chat and for a while. They're going to take us out at 8, but let's have some fun before that. Thank you for coming, everybody.